Have you ever ruined something? Just when it started to feel good, you got the job, and then stopped trying, you fell in love, and then pulled away, you made a promise to yourself, and then broke it. People call it self-sabotage. But what if it's not sabotage at all? What if it's protection? From a part of you that remembers what it cost to hope. A part that learned long ago that closeness meant pain, that success meant being seen, and being seen meant being judged. And so, every time life starts to feel safe, you run, not because you're weak, but because a part of you believes it's the only way to survive. There's something I discovered that changed everything. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Ethan stood in the doorway of his apartment, the same one he had once decorated with her in mind, the framed photo on the shelf, gone, the coffee mug she used every morning, tucked away in a box again. This was the third time in 2 years that Ethan had watched someone he loved walk away, or maybe. He was the one who walked first. It always played out the same. He'd meet someone, feel something real, then vanish emotionally before they could. Every relationship began with fireworks and ended in smoke. His friends called it bad luck. He called it a pattern, but deep down, Ethan wasn't confused. He was scared, scared of getting close, scared of being known, and most of all, scared of what might happen if someone saw the parts of him even he couldn't look at. So he kept a safe distance, emotionally, mentally, sometimes physically, not because he didn't care, but because caring came with consequences. He had learned that early, back when showing feelings meant being mocked, back when asking for comfort meant being told he was too sensitive. So Ethan became easygoing. He joked when things got hard. He distracted others with kindness, so no one would notice his shame. But every time life gave him something good, he found a way to lose it, not on purpose, but like clockwork, a text not replied to, a deadline missed, an argument ignited by silence. It was as if a part of him couldn't bear the weight of being okay, and in his quietest moments he would ask himself, why do I keep doing this? What's wrong with me? But maybe the real question wasn't about what was wrong. Maybe it was what was wounded, and just like that, the memory returned. He was 6, curled up in the corner of his room, hiding the drawing he'd spent all morning on. It was messy, bright, too loud. His mother had said too much that night. Ethan learned a quiet lesson: love had limits, and if he wanted to be safe, he had to be less excited, less intense, less him. So he became the good boy, the quiet one, the one who didn't ask for too much, the one who made people laugh before they got angry. He kept peace by keeping parts of himself hidden. And every time someone praised his maturity, his calmness, his emotional control, it reinforced the mask. But deep inside, there was a voice still screaming from that corner, asking to be seen. And every time Ethan got close to someone, that voice got louder, not in words, in panic, in retreat, in sabotage. Because if love had once been the source of shame, then closeness now felt like a threat. Even joy began to feel suspicious. Even kindness made him flinch, because he remembered the price of being too much. And no matter how old he got, there was a part of him that still believed he needed to earn love, by being small, by being easy, by being whatever someone else needed him to be. He never realized that the version of him people fell for was the version that was slowly disappearing, because he couldn't hold joy and fear at the same time. So every time something beautiful arrived, he dropped it like it was on fire, not because he didn't want it, but because a part of him had never learned that love could feel safe. If this echoes in you, even just a little, you're not alone. And maybe you've been carrying a lesson too heavy for a child for far too long. There's a room inside you, not marked by doors or locks, but memory. It's where everything you've tried not to be waits: anger, need, longing, fear, the parts of you that spoke up once and got shut down, the parts that felt Too much, too needy, too loud, too inconvenient. You didn't kill them, you buried them, and they didn't vanish. They became your shadow, not evil, not broken, just unseen. Carl Jung called it the unconscious self, the collection of all the parts we hide to be loved. But here's the truth. What we hide doesn't disappear, it drives the wheel from underneath. It leaks through choices, through patterns, through what we call self-sabotage. Because when you suppress a voice for too long, it doesn't stop speaking, it finds another way to be heard, and sometimes that way is destruction, not out of malice, but out of memory, a memory that says, if joy once led to pain, then maybe pain is safer. If being authentic once brought rejection, then maybe masking is survival. And so the shadow waits, in the corner of your mind, pulling levers when things get too close, too bright, too vulnerable, not to hurt you, but to protect you from the world, from others, from yourself. But protection without permission is still imprisonment, and the saddest part, you can live your whole life thinking you're broken, when really, you've just been divided, split between the self you show and the self you were told was too much. So here's a question to hold. What have you been hiding, just to be loved? And what if the part you hide is the part that's most capable of setting you free? It started small, a missed call, ignored for no reason, a project left unfinished when it mattered most, a compliment met with a joke that turned it into nothing. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. He told himself he was tired, busy, not in the mood, but deep down, something familiar stirred. A quiet urge to undo what was working, to dim what was shining, to back away. Just as things began to feel steady. It wasn't loud, it was subtle, like taking the wrong turn even when you know the right way, like pushing someone away. With a smile, the world calls it self-sabotage, but to Ethan, it felt like reflex, automatic, predictable. He would build something good, and then knock it over, and when asked why, he couldn't answer, because there was no clear reason. Only a sensation, tightness in the chest, a voice that whispered, "This is too good, it won't last, don't get used to it." It wasn't logic, it was a memory wearing fear's clothing, a learned defense, because somewhere in his nervous system, joy had been paired with betrayal, love had been linked to abandonment, so now anything soft felt unsafe. And anything stable felt foreign. That's the thing about the shadow. It doesn't scream, it nudges, it picks at loose threads. Until something unravels, it makes silence feel like rejection. It makes success feel like danger, and worst of all, it convinces you that you're the problem, that you're unworthy, that you always ruin things. But maybe you're not ruining anything. Maybe you're just protecting something, a scared version of you that once got hurt for letting down their guard. And maybe now it's time to ask that part of you, what are you so afraid of? And listen, without trying to fix it, just listen, because sometimes healing doesn't start with answers. It starts with letting the wound speak. The room was quiet, not just outside, but inside Ethan too. For the first time in months, he wasn't pretending to be okay. He was just sitting across from someone who wasn't trying to fix him, just trying to understand. His therapist had asked questions before, but this one landed differently. What's the first memory of being told you were too much? It echoed, like the walls inside him had never heard that question before. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came, just heat behind his eyes, a lump in his throat, and a flicker. A scene 6 years old, holding up a drawing, heart full of color, a voice, "You always make a mess." 8 years old, crying too loudly at a funeral, a hand, "You need to toughen up." 12 years old, defending a friend at school, a look, "You always take things too seriously." Over and over, the same lesson, too emotional, too intense, too much. So he learned to shrink, to edit, to read rooms faster than his own needs, and somewhere along the way, he stopped asking questions, because questions had once led to rejection. So he adapted. He made others comfortable, even if it meant being uncomfortable with himself. But now, Sitting across from someone who wasn't flinching, he let the words come. I think I've been scared of being known. Because if someone really sees me, they might leave. And his therapist said, or they might stay. That sentence cracked something open because for the first time, Ethan realized he wasn't broken, he was guarded, not because he didn't want love, but because love once hurt, so every time he got close, the shadow stepped in to protect him by creating distance, by sowing doubt, by choosing safe over true. It wasn't betrayal, it was loyalty to the child who needed armor, but now, that armor was too heavy and Ethan was ready, not to fight his shadow, but to meet it not as an enemy, but as an old friend who had been waiting. To be heard, Ethan began with a blank page, no structure, no plan, just a pen, and the decision to stop running. He didn't know what to write at first, but slowly, the words came, not sentences, names. He started with rage. Dear Rage, I've hated you for as long as I can remember. You embarrassed me, you cost me friends, you made me afraid of my own voice. And yet, you only ever showed up when I felt powerless. You were the scream when I wasn't allowed to cry. You were the fire when I was told to stay quiet. I see that now. And I'm sorry for turning you into a monster when you were trying to protect me. Then came shame. Dear shame, you followed me like a shadow. Every compliment you turned into suspicion. Every moment of pride. You whispered I was a fraud. I wore you like a second skin and called it humility. But you weren't born from truth. You were built from judgment and fear. You wanted to keep me from reaching too far, from standing out. You thought safety lived in silence, and I believed you. Until now. And finally, fear, dear fear. You've been the loudest. You showed up before every leap, every kiss, every dream. You told me not to trust, not to hope, not to try, but you only whispered those things because you remembered what it felt like to fall. You weren't trying to destroy me. You were trying to keep me grounded. But in doing so, you kept me small. And with each letter, something in Ethan softened. He wasn't trying to change those parts of himself. He was finally listening, giving them space, letting them speak. And in doing that, they began to quiet, not because they were silenced, but because they were seen, acknowledged, welcomed. This was the beginning of something new, not a war, not a fix. A reunion, the scattered parts of him. Coming home, he was 12. Sitting at the kitchen table, fists clenched under the surface. His father had just raised his voice, again, not in rage, but in dismissal. Ethan had spoken up, had defended a kid at school who got picked on for crying. He thought it was the right thing to do. But his father didn't see courage, he saw weakness. Why do you care so much? He snapped. And then came the sentence that stuck, stop acting like such a girl. Ethan didn't cry, he didn't argue, he just nodded, and rage swallowed the rest. That night he punched his pillow until his knuckles hurt, and for the first time he felt power, not peace. But power, because in that moment anger was the only thing louder than shame. It felt like fire, like control, like something no one could take from him. But when he tried to explain that to his mom, she said, "Don't talk back, you're lucky he even cares." So rage got locked away, branded as bad, branded as dangerous, but it never left. It stayed in his chest, and every time Ethan felt ignored, overlooked, disrespected, rage came back, not in violence, but in silence, in withdrawal, in passive destruction. He wouldn't scream, he'd simply vanish. He'd stop showing up, stop answering, stop caring, at least on the outside. But inside, he burned, and for years, he hated that fire. Until one day, as an adult, he wrote to it, "Dear Rage, I'm sorry for abandoning you. You were never the problem. You were the response to being silenced, to being small, to being told my feelings were wrong. You were my defense when no one defended me." And for the first time, rage didn't feel like the enemy. It felt like a boy in a kitchen, trying not to disappear, trying to matter, trying to survive a world that didn't make space for soft boys with strong feelings. So Ethan made space, And rage didn't roar, it exhaled. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were, before the world told you to forget, before the silence, before the edits, before the mask. Carl Jung called it integration, not elimination, not fixing, not fighting the parts of you that hurt, but bringing them home, holding them, without trying to change them, letting them exist in the same room as joy, as love, as you. It's a paradox, because everything in you wants to cut the shadow out, to fix it, to destroy it. But healing doesn't come from force, it comes from friendship, from the moment you stop asking, how do I get rid of this part of me, and start asking, what does it need? That's the doorway to wholeness, to peace, to a life that doesn't feel like performance. Ethan had spent years performing, saying yes when he meant no, laughing to cover the panic, helping everyone else, so no one would ask how he was. And he was tired, not just physically, existentially, tired of splitting himself into pieces, tired of protecting others from his truth. So he tried something radical. He stopped hiding, not all at once, not with a grand announcement, but slowly, quietly. By letting himself feel fully, speak truthfully, rest honestly, and with each step, the parts of him that once screamed began to whisper, not because they were less, but because they were finally safe. That's what integration is, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of permission, permission to feel, to rage, to rest, to love without shrinking, without justifying, without needing to be perfect. And that permission began with a single shift in question, from what's wrong with me to what's wounded, and what might it need to feel whole again. Ethan didn't wake up one morning and feel transformed. There was no lightning strike, no sudden clarity, just stillness, a new kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't come from shutting down, but from softening. He stopped running, stopped hiding, and most importantly, he stopped performing. He let silence stay, let sadness speak, let joy linger without apology. He learned to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. And slowly, the people around him changed too. Not because they became different, but because he stopped filtering himself through their expectations. He no longer needed to be palatable, or inspiring, or put together. He just needed to be honest, and honesty brought connection, not with everyone, but with the ones who mattered, people who didn't flinch when he said, "I'm not okay today." People who held space, not advice. People who didn't treat his depth like danger. And in that space, something rare happened. He started to trust, not the world, not even other people, but himself, his gut, his emotions, his yes, his no. He realized healing isn't about always feeling good. It's about feeling everything, and knowing you won't abandon yourself because of it. That was the shift, from survival to presence, from reacting to responding, from being scattered to being whole. And in that wholeness, love returned, not as rescue, not as reward, but as resonance. Because when Ethan stopped fighting who he was, he stopped attracting people who only loved the version of him that disappeared. He met someone new. They weren't perfect, neither was he, but for the first time, he didn't sabotage it. He didn't ghost himself. He showed up fully, not because he had all the answers, but because he finally knew the question, what part of me needs to be seen today? And he asked it. Every morning. They were never monsters, not rage, not shame, not fear. They were messengers, sent from the parts of you that didn't know how else to speak, the parts that wanted to be held, heard, understood. And maybe that's what healing really is, not becoming someone new, but remembering the version of you who never needed fixing. Only space, only kindness, only the safety to unfold without being asked to explain. Ethan didn't arrive at wholeness with a checklist. He didn't conquer his shadow, he welcomed it. And when he did, the sabotage stopped. Not because he tried harder, but because he was no longer divided. The war inside had lost its fuel. Because he stopped choosing sides. He let all of him sit at the table, the child, the fighter, the pleaser, the protector. And the one who was tired of pretending, they learned to speak, to listen, to rest, together, not in harmony always, but in truth, and that truth is where wholeness begins. So if you've ever felt like you break everything, like you're the problem, the weak link, the storm inside your own life, you're not alone, and you're not broken, you're just full of voices that want to be heard. And when you stop running, they stop screaming. When you start listening, they soften, and maybe that's all they ever wanted. If something in this spoke to you, leave a comment below. I'm ready to stop running. Not for me, for you, for the version of you waiting at the edge of everything you fear, saying, will you finally see me? This isn't the end, it's the beginning.